Hi, it's Penny here, and today what I wanted to do is go through all the book releases from 2022 that I was really excited to read and see, one, whether I actually read them or not, and two, whether they lived up to my own personal hype. So I think there's 16 books on this list, and I have to tell you, the first one on the list, I did read it, but I really didn't like it. So we are talking about Seasonal Fears by Seanan McGuire. I really had good reason to think I would like this. This is a sequel spin-off book to Middle Game by Seanan McGuire, and I absolutely love Middle Game. In fact, I even reread it before I read Seasonal Fears, and I love that reread as well. So in Middle Game, we've got these twins called Roger and Dodger who have the power of maths and language, and these alchemists are trying to raise these children to become gods in a way where those alchemists could take advantage of their powers. And so many of the concepts were amazing, and as well just the emotional journey that the characters go through. I loved it so much. And then we got Seasonal Fears. So Seasonal Fears, we're following this couple, Melanie and Darren. I feel like his name is meant to almost rhyme with Melanie. Darren was a different character completely. And honestly, the main boy's name, I don't remember because I didn't care about him at all. So Melanie and her boyfriend are basically being set up by those same alchemists to become like the avatars of summer and winter. But a bunch of things go wrong, and basically it's just this couple trying to survive this competition that they never really wanted to be a part of. But unlike Middle Game, I didn't feel like the concepts were interesting at all, and the characters' relationships, again, not that interesting. So I guess this book definitely did not live up to the hype. But the next book on my list is Looking Better, so that's A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers. This is the sequel to A Psalm for the Wild Built in the Monk and Robot series. Also, very sadly, the last book, because it is just a duology. In this, we're following a teen monk called Dex who goes out into the world to try and figure out what they want to do with their life and just why they don't feel satisfied. While they're out in the wilderness, they come across this robot who is a representative for the robots that have gone to live in the wilderness, because in this world, at some point, the robots gained a consciousness. They said, we're going to go and live out in the wilderness and we never want to talk to humans again. But now this one has come back to see how the humans are going. And it's just this lovely friendship about Dex and Moscat the robot as they get to know each other and get to know themselves. But I love this book. I do think the second book maybe wasn't quite as good as the first book, but there were still some really amazing moments, and it lived up to the hype, except that I didn't realize it was only going to be a duology. So from that perspective, it was disappointing. But the actual book, I loved it. Then we've got the latest volume of the Monstress graphic novel series by Marjorie and Sana Takeda. So that was volume 7, Devourer, that came out end of last year, I think. This one was okay. Like, it probably met expectations. I definitely enjoy the new volumes of these when I take the time to go back and reread the whole series so that I remember everything that's going on. So I don't feel like I followed volume 7 as well as I could have because I didn't do that reread. But still, I just really love the art and the vibe of these books. This is set in a world where there's a bunch of different races kind of at war. We've got the ancients, which are like these animal type creatures, godlike beings. We've got the old gods who are like demon, amazing godlike beings. We've also got the arcanics who are like part human, part ancient. We've also got the cats who have like necromancy powers, and like the more tails they have, the more powers they have. We got witches. There's just so many cool things going on in these comics, and the art is beautiful. Our main character has like a demon inside her that sometimes comes out. But like also so much has happened throughout this series that I can't talk about because it would be spoilers, but also because I've forgotten a lot of it. So I think volume 7 lived up to my expectations, but I really need to do another reread of that series. Then we've got Greywaren by Maggie Stiefvater. This is the third and final book of the Dreamers trilogy. I read this, and again I reread all the books in the series up to this, and I think that was really important because it really got me into the story again and got me loving the characters. I think if I hadn't done that reread, I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much. So this is a world where there is dream magic. That's why the trilogy is called The Dreamers. And there are people who believe that this magic is going to bring about the end of the world. So they're trying to kill off all these dreamers. And then we've got the dreamers just trying to survive. There are some characters in the series that I absolutely loved. I will admit, I wish the third book had done more. I think there was a lot more that could have been done in this series, but I also wouldn't say it was a disappointment. I still really love this world and I loved what happened. I wanted more. I'm really sad that it's the end. Then we've got The World We Make by N.K. Jemisin. This is the second and final book of the Great Cities duology. So the sequel to The City We Became. In this world, cities can gain a soul, and we're following the story of New York gaining its soul and the different people that are avatars for New York and its different boroughs as they go up against this force that doesn't want New York to be born. This was originally going to be a trilogy, and then due to real-world circumstances, it had to be changed to a duology. From what N.K. Jemisin said in the author's note, it sounds like her planned plot for the trilogy was too close to what actually happened in the real world, and so she felt like she needed to change it. And I don't know if that's why, but the second book I felt was quite disappointing. I didn't feel like the concepts were as amazing as they were in the first book, and I also didn't think the plot went anywhere particularly interesting. So overall, I was a bit disappointed in this book, and honestly, I suspect that N.K. Jemisin is disappointed with what she had to do with it as well. So that's a shame. Oh, I just realized, like, I've been reading all of these on the list so far. I think I read all the books on the list. Then we've got Where the Drowned Girls Go by Seanan McGuire. This is the 7th book in the Wayward Children series. So this series is about children who found these magical doors, and when they go through them, they have an amazing adventure, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, they end up coming back to the stupid normal world where they have to do stupid normal things, and they're struggling to get back into that. So there is this home for wayward children where these children can go and be with other children who've had a similar experience. And in this series, it's usually one book is an adventure at the school, and then every second book is a story of one of these children finding their door and going on their magical adventure. So Where the Drowned Girls Goes is one of the school adventures. We're basically following this girl who's been having a hard time, and she decides to change from the school where they try to find their doors again and like really enjoyed their experiences. Instead, she decides to transfer to this other school where they try to make you completely forget about your other world experience and just go back to normal life. Now, I have had somewhat mixed experiences with this series. There are books I really loved and other books that I haven't really enjoyed as much, but I think Where the Drowned Girls Go was one of the better ones, and I really enjoyed it. We get to see a bunch of characters that we've met in previous stories, but it's also something new, and we get a bunch of new characters as well and get to learn about more magical worlds. So I think we can put this one on the side of it lived up to the hype. Oh no, the next one. So the next one that I was excited for is House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas, the sequel to A House of Blood and Earth, Earth and Blood. Not sure which way around those words go. Anyway, I went into the first book not really being that sure about it because there was some Sarah J. Maas stuff that I hadn't liked that much before, like the end of the Throne of Glass series wasn't my favorite, and I didn't really like the Court of Thorn and Roses series, so I was like, not sure, but I went into A House of Earth and Blood and I ended up really loving it. I was so surprised. It's a really fun urban fantasy world, and we've got this party girl. Oh no, I've forgotten her name. Bryce. Wow. I think my brain's been trying to delete these books from my brain because it doesn't want to think about how disappointing A House of Sky and Breath was. So in the first book, Bryce is this party girl, and she's so strong and she's really smart and she figures out all these mysteries. And even though Sarah J. Maas did a lot of her thing where the main character knows something but they don't tell you even though you're getting their perspective, Sarah J. Maas does a lot of that, which annoyed me. Although, again, I reread A House of Earth and Blood and I didn't find it as annoying on the reread. In fact, I liked it even more on the reread, and so I was so excited for A House of Sky and Breath, and honestly, it was such a waste of time. I think Sarah J. Maas just loves her characters too much, and she just enjoys having them interact in really immature kinds of ways. It's all about the romances and just like, anyway, the whole thing was very messy. It didn't really progress the plot, except in one particular way, which really annoyed me and made me unsure if I could ever continue this series. I honestly don't know. I don't think I will like any more of this series, so I should stop. I'm so bad at DNFing things, but I should stop. Anyway, so that was a disappointment. But then I read A Storm of Sisters by Michelle Harrison. So this one, I only just got to it recently. It is a middle grade series about these girls whose family has these magical artifacts. And each book is just them having a little adventure, solving a bit of a mystery. I really love the sister dynamics. They're just really fun, but also really witchy and really smart. So A Storm of Sisters, we've got the girls going to their dad's cousin, I think, who lives out in this snowy wilderness in a town called Wilderness. And when they're there, there's this winter carnival happening, but there's also a bit of a mystery going on with this ghost and this crystal ball, and they can't help but get involved in this mystery. And honestly, just so much fun. Better than I thought it would be. Then we've got Gallant by V. Schwab. Gallant follows this girl who is deaf. I read this right at the very beginning of last year, so I'm struggling to remember now. She's an orphan living in this boarding school, really struggling because she's deaf and people aren't willing to put in the effort to communicate with her. And she also keeps seeing these ghost-like creatures, and they're quite creepy. But then she gets a letter from her uncle who says, "Come to Gallant." That's what it's called, Gallant, right? That's why the book's called Gallant. "We didn't know you existed, but we always missed you." As well, she has this notebook from her mother, which is really strange and seems like her mother was losing her mind. Honestly, so many cool concepts pulled together. When she gets to this uncle's house, nobody even knew she was coming, and there's this strangeness with this garden gate that you're never meant to go through, and this other cousin who seems very unhappy about a lot of things. And I really liked it, but also it was a little bit unsatisfying because I felt like it just needed a little bit more development, and the ending felt somewhat incomplete. So I enjoyed it. And when I think back on it, I really like a lot of the ideas in it, but I just think it needed something more. I don't know, it's been a long time since I read it, but I think I would say it lived up to the hype. I really need an in-between category, like there's books where, oh my god, I loved it, books where it was like, wow, what a disappointment, and then books where it was like, yeah, that was okay, I'm glad I read it, but not a favourite, Anyway, the next book that I read was Fevered Star by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is the sequel to Black Sun in the Between Heaven and Earth series. So this is a fantasy world inspired by pre-Columbian American mythology. We've got the Sun Priestess who is fighting to keep her position of power, but also has kind of a connection to this sun god. And then we've also got this man who has been made blind and become an avatar for this crow god. And as well, there's this other girl who's kind of like a mermaid type person, sort of. And they've kind of been brought together in this battle between the gods, which is kind of playing out as a battle between the different tribes of this area. There's definitely some really interesting ideas in the story. I did feel like Fevered Star, the pacing was a little bit off. There were some really epic things that happened, but a lot of the story around it, I didn't feel like as much happened as I would have liked. But still, the bits I did really like. So I think overall I would still say it wasn't bad, and I will be continuing. I think this year we're going to get the third book, The Mirrored Earth. I really should have all these things written down rather than just trying to remember everything, but I'm not that organized. So anyway. Then the next one on the list is The Book of Night by Holly Black. This is Holly Black's first adult fantasy novel. A lot of people were really excited for it. I didn't really have any interest in Holly Black's Cruel Prince trilogy, but I have read other books by Holly Black in the past. Doll Parts, her middle grade series, and also The White Cat must be on these shelves somewhere. I love that trilogy, so I was really hopeful that Book of Night would be amazing, but now I can't even remember anything about the synopsis other than some kind of girl who lives on the darker side of the tracks, like an urban fantasy, and she's involved in criminal activities, and also she has some kind of shadow magic. I started reading this and I was so bored. I've seen people who really liked it, but I couldn't get into it. And I wouldn't be surprised if, given the really low ratings I've seen people giving this book, if the series doesn't get continued or takes a long time for her to continue. I know there are some people who liked it, but I I was so bored, and it felt like it was trying really hard to be like dark and gritty, but it wasn't. So unfortunately I have to put this one on the side of disappointing. And same with the next one. So the next one is Upgrade by Blake Crouch. I really loved Dark Matter and Recursion. Again, they're up on this shelf here. I can actually see those ones because they're ugly colors on the spines. But Dark Matter and Recursion were both like twisty multiverse time travel stories. I really love them. Upgrade, I knew it was a bit of a risk because this one is more of a like genetic modification story where this man ends up being modified genetically and kind of gaining all these abilities. But the man was so boring. A lot of the genetic modification didn't make sense. And I know in these kind of books you have to like be willing to like suspend your disbelief to some degree, but I couldn't. And nothing that was happening was interesting. He thought he was so amazing. I wasn't convinced. Yeah, this one definitely goes on the side of disappointing. Then I read Just Like Home by Sarah Gailey. This is a book about, I'm trying to remember what the initial synopsis was, a woman who goes back to her family home to look after her sick mother, and her father was a serial killer, and there's some strange things going on in the house. And I really liked it to begin with. The things that were going on in the house were very creepy. Definitely reminded me of all the times when I'd be trying to sleep at night, everything's dark, and I'd be convinced that dark, creepy things were around in the house. It had that feeling, especially like that feeling of being a kid and like wanting to call your parents to check the monsters under the bed. I liked that part, but there was this other guy staying in the house and I didn't like him and feel like he added anything much to the story. And again, I think this is one where there was potential, but I didn't feel like the story had enough to it. I think this was a fairly short book, and I think if it had been written out a bit more and added more to, it could have been good, but yeah, I think I was just slightly, like I enjoyed some of this, but I think it probably edges on the side of disappointment. Then we've got Saga Volume 10. So the Saga graphic novel series is about this couple. They are from warring planets, or like the planet is at war with the moon, but they get together anyway and have a child, and then they're basically on the run from both their people because they weren't meant to do that. I think I quite enjoyed the beginning of this series, but as it's gone on, I don't feel like it has a clear direction. And Volume 10 especially came after the authors have taken a bit of a hiatus, and Volume 9 had a quite significant event in it. But I don't feel like Volume 10 set up like a new direction as a result of that event. And I feel like the beginning of the series, like I can't remember exactly, but I think the beginning of the series was saying, like it's written from the daughter's perspective, like she's older and she's saying this is what happened, and it's kind of heavily implying that there's like some big events happening in the future. And so I thought like it had a clear conclusion in mind that it was heading towards. And so then all the events from these graphic novels that we're reading would be building up to that event. But you know what I think? I think maybe the event in Volume 9 was that event. But now we're still continuing. I think I have to DNF the series because I don't care about any of the characters or anything that's happening. Then lastly, we've got Tread of Angels by Rebecca Roanhorse. So this is a standalone novella. I'm very sad that it's a standalone because the world had so much potential. It's based on like Christian mythology. So we've got the elect and the fallen, which are essentially angels and demons. And the demons are like oppressed, but they also have this ability to find divinity. So we're in this mining town where they mine divinity, and the fallen can help to find this divinity, and then they use the divinity to make all these kind of like steampunk contraptions. I really love the world, but I do think because it was just a novella, it was a bit too much to get all the world building and also get much character development. So I felt like the character development was lacking, and we're kind of following this woman as she tries to investigate this murder that her sister has been accused of. And I didn't feel like the murder investigation was very interesting or clever, and I feel like murder investigations have to be somewhat clever. So the actual plot, not that great. The characters were okay, but I needed more to really get to love them. But the world was really great. There was so much potential. So I do hope Rebecca Roanhorse will write more in this world. And I think for the world, I would still put this on the side of lived up to my expectations. So that means I actually read all the books on my anticipated releases list of 2022, except for the ones that never came out. So like, those aren't my fault, right? So I'm very impressed with myself for keeping up with new releases. Hopefully I can continue to do that in 2023. Do let me know if you read any of the books that I talked about in this video, whether you read them and you thought that they lived up to the hype. I think when I looked at it, I had 7 on the disappointing side and 9 on the lived up to expectations side. So like about half and half, because there were some that could have swapped sides. And I'm not sure, is a 50% success rate for new releases a good success rate? I'm not sure. Also let me know any 2022 releases that you really liked or were a really big disappointment. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.